Hey, thanks again, everyone, for joining. Thanks to Hannah and to Rabbi Shor for putting this, this event together. I was asked to give a title for it. I guess I would call it Achdut. I would call it Unity in the Face of Crisis. And I'd like to begin with this Devar Torah, but in order to appreciate this Devar Torah, we need a little bit of history, and it's history that you may know. I say this in the wake of what happened at the beginning of the week when Israel was falsely accused of bombing that hospital in Gaza, and when media and people, the usual suspects, as we would say, came out and blamed us. So the president of Israel commented and said this was a blood libel, and it certainly was. Even though now papers like the New York Times have printed a retraction, and who knows whether other people who still feel we did it will retract in the face of clear evidence that it was an errant rocket by a terrorist group in Gaza that caused that tragedy. But so in that regard, I want to call to your attention probably what was the most famous blood libel in the 20th century, from what historians say, at least. And that libel related to an event that took place in 1911, right before Pesach, in Kiev, when a Christian child, 12-year-old boy, was brutally murdered. And the people there, anti-Semitism was always, certainly in Tsarist Russia. It was no different in Kiev. Anti-Semitism sentiment was very, very strong. And immediately they found a culprit, and they accused this simple Jew, Menachem Mendel Bialis, of having committed the crime. They put him in jail. He was in jail for 2 years. And then the trial began 2 years later in 1913, at the end of September. It lasted, believe it or not, until October 24th, which is today. So it's like 110 years ago, if I got the dates correct, certainly around that time. And the trial lasted for a month, and eventually he was acquitted. The story has a happy ending. He was acquitted. He eventually goes to Eretz Yisrael. Living in Eretz Yisrael at that time was very difficult. It was very hard for him to make a go of it. He eventually emigrates to the United States, and he passes away in the United States. The details you can look up if you Google Menachem Mendel Bialis. It's a fascinating story. And given whatever publicity there was at that time, the trial made world news. From what I'm able to find out, this was an amazing thing, and especially since it was clear, at least to Western observers, that these were trumped-up charges. This was clearly, they were bringing in false witnesses and so on, in order to prove that he committed the crime, even though he had alibis that he did not commit the crime. Anyway, what happened was that one of the arguments that the prosecution made against him was the following, and you'll see why. The prosecution said as follows. Where the prosecution got this chazal, I have no idea, but they quoted a pasuk in Yechezkel and a Gemara in Yevamos. And the Gemara in Yevamos comments on a pasuk in Yechezkel, which says, Atem Kru Adam. The pasuk says, Atem Adam. You, the Jewish people, are called Adam. And the Gemara says, Atem Kru Adam. You, the Jewish people, are called Adam. The Umos Olam are not called Adam. So the prosecution said, what do you see from that? You see that as far as the Jews are concerned, the only people who are human, Adam, are Jews, and all non-Jews are not even human. And that's why Jewish people in general see nothing wrong with murdering and killing this Christian boy. Of course, it happened April 2nd in 1911, which was just a few weeks before Pesach, and this was the famous blood libel that the Jews were using the blood of this murdered boy for the Passover ritual. So that's how it became this famous blood libel. But this was the argument. The argument was that Atem kruyim Adam, you are Adam. The Jewish people are called human, so to say, but the non-Jews are not called Adam, and therefore the Jews have no value for non-Jewish life, and they see nothing wrong with murdering non-Jews. So the defense rose to the occasion, and defense quoted the interpretation, which has become the famous interpretation of that Chazal, the interpretation of the Lubliner Rav, Rav Meir Lublin, the founder of the Daf Yomi, and he interpreted the pasuk this way. He said, in Hebrew, as I'm sure we all know, nouns have plural and have singular, lashon rabim, lashon yachid. And this applies to all nouns, yeled, yeladim, etc., etc. However, when we get to the word Adam, there is no plural. It's only lashon yachid. It's only in the singular. You can say b'nei Adam, but the word Adam in and of itself cannot be pluralized. So the Lubliner Rav said as follows: the Jewish people are called Adam because we're one. We are one unit. We are one family. We're not divided. But as far as the non-Jews are concerned, they're also human, but everyone feels differently. And he went on to say that if a Frenchman is hurting in Paris, or pardon me, if a Frenchman is hurting, let's say in one part of the world, the French citizens in France are not going to feel particularly connected to that person. And that's how it is in the non-Jewish world. But as far as the Jewish people are concerned, we are called Adam. We are one. We're like one body. I'm using my, we're like one guf. And if one part of the body suffers, then the entire body suffers. So this idea of Atem kruyim Adam, we are called Adam. We're one. It's an incredible idea when you think about it, that we're family. And because of the fact that we're family, we hurt. One Jew hurts for another Jew. It doesn't matter where these two Jews live, even if we don't know who they are, and even if we can't speak the same language, and we look differently and dress differently. One Jew hurts for another Jew. This is what it means. Atem kruyim Adam, v'ein akum kruyim Adam. And it's a very, very powerful idea. And especially in the wake of what we've seen here, obviously those of us who are here, but we see this throughout. We're all getting emails from families across the world to see how the Jews are stepping up, saying Tehillim together, acts of chesed together, donating time and doing everything they can. There's so much that everyone is trying to do in order to demonstrate that we're all one. We're all one family, and that's very comforting. It's very exciting. It's very wonderful. It was somewhat similar to this. After in the wake of the Yom Kippur War, I remember coming to Israel then, being a rabbi in the United States, and again experienced the same type of unity, the same oneness, the same coming together. It's an important thing, and especially in light of the fact that prior to this, as we all know, the country was polarized because of the judicial reform, and the polarization, the split, affected, literally tore the country apart between the religious and the non-religious, and the pro-judicial reform and against the government and for the government. Those of us who were living here, and even, everyone heard about how painful this was, especially what happened on Yom Kippur with people objecting to a davening in Tel Aviv. Again, we're not saying right or wrong here, but the point is the country was radicalized, it was split, it was torn. And now we've all come together. This is our reality. Our reality was not what happened prior. Our reality is that we're really one people. And it's something that we should not forget. God willing, we're going to win this war, and we will be vindicated. But, even after the Yom Kippur War, the unity fizzled. Unfortunately, it didn't last. And God willing, this oneness that's coming together, we have to figure out a way to make sure that it is sustained, and that it will continue even afterwards. And we'll forget that this is our true. This is our true reality. I'd like to connect this with an idea from the parasha, the Bienenfeld. One of the questions that the Rishonim ask is that if Abraham, at the age of 75, which is how the story of Abraham opens, Abraham, 75, already found Hashem. Hashem is communicating with him, and at the age of 75, and Hashem is telling him to go to Eretz Canaan. So the Mefarshim say, why was it necessary, as we see in Pirkei Avos, why was it necessary for Avram to be tested 10 times? We all know, the various different tests. Why was that necessary? So there are two basically different opinions. The opinion of the Rambam, which is brought down in the third Chelek in the Moreh Nevuchim, the Rambam says, really, Avram did not have to. God had no doubts whatsoever about Abraham's devotion and his loyalty to him. So why was Avram tested? Avram wasn't tested for himself, the Rambam says. Avram was tested in order to set an example, in order to be a model of what it means to be as, a knight of faith, as Kierkegaard called Avram, a knight of faith. This is what it means to believe in Hashem. This is what it means that notwithstanding setbacks and hardships, this is what it means never to lose one's belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Hashgacha. And this needs to be a model for the rest of the world. Just say parenthetically, I'm not sure if any of you remember, there was a Catholic journalist by the name of William Buckley, a rather famous person, and back in the 1970s, the 60s and 70s, when you had the Soviet the student struggle for Soviet Jewry, he wrote a piece that I've never forgotten. He wrote a piece as a Catholic, and he was amazed to see how Jews in the United States, who never met a Russian Jew and didn't know their names, but were protesting and writing and doing everything they could to arouse an awareness in the United States and everywhere else about the plight of Russian Jewry. He says, how come Jews are doing this and Catholics aren't doing this? Apparently at that time, Catholics in different parts of the world were being persecuted. And he was wondering, how come Jews do this and the Catholics are not doing this? I don't recall whether he came up with a conclusion, but I remember he was talking and he was saying this out of admiration for the Jewish people. Look at what they do. I think the answer, though, and I don't recall whether this was a conclusion that he came to, but the answer is rather straightforward. As Jews, we're not just a religion. We're a family. We're a people. We care about each other. That's what members of a family do. And that's what we're seeing now, this sense of family, this sense of Achdut, this sense of Guf Echad. And that's the view of the Rambam. Ramban had a different interpretation. Ramban he says this at the beginning of Parshas Lech Lecha. Why did Abraham have to go through all these tests? There's a different answer. He says Abraham, to use a contemporary expression, was a work in progress. Every test that Hashem tested Avram because Hashem was convinced that there was more to Avram than met the eye. True, at the age of 75, he accomplished a great deal, but that was just the beginning. There was much more. There were levels of greatness to Avram that every trial brought out another level of greatness. Every trial that he went to, and Avram himself realized this. Because he passed every test, he discovered something new in himself, something better in himself. He became better. That's the view. So that was, according to Ramban, that was the purpose of the test. I think that also has a message for us. There is a statement from the Navi in Yirmiyahu, and the whole pasuk goes, Hoi ki goy ki gadol hayom hahu me'en kamo. This is a wondrous day. Eis tzarahi liYaakov umimena yivashea. People are familiar with the last part of that pasuk. Eis tzarahi liYaakov umimena yivashea. That it is a troubling time a difficult time, a painful time for Yaakov, but he will be saved from it. Right? It's a wonderful, Navi is telling us that no matter what we go through, ultimately, Hashem will save us, we'll experience salvation, and at the end of the day, we'll all be okay. So the Baal Shem Tov, though, has a very different reading of this. Not to, it doesn't negate the pshat, but the Baal Shem Tov says like this. He says, Eis tzara hi Yaakov. It is a very difficult, hard time for Yaakov. Umimena, from that very crisis. In other words, by confronting that very test, that very crisis, those hardships, those difficulties, a person will discover, he will be saved, meaning what? He will discover within himself such a new, powerful definition of who he is or who she is, that precisely because of the tzara, the person will discover levels of greatness that they never knew they had. And I think this also is an experience that, just like according to the Rambam, I think we're setting a certain model, moral, ethical excellence that the world should be able to see and the world should be able to admire about the Jewish people, who we are. This is who we are. So too, with the understanding of Nisayon, in the words of Ramban, it's something similar. We've discovered, all of us, everyone who's, we're all dealing with this trauma. And of course, we're still in it. It's not over yet. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. But it's precisely in dealing with the tzara, not brushing it under, not ignoring it, not trying to repress it, dealing with it openly, confronting it, dealing with it. Everyone, of course, everyone dealing with it in a different way. It's precisely that confrontation with it, seizing it, that we discover things about ourselves that that frankly we never knew before. And all of a sudden, I didn't know I had the capacity to do this. I didn't know I felt this type of desire to do chesed. I didn't know I had the strength within me, to see people and to talk to people and to, give people chizuk, et cetera, et cetera. We discover things about the test is for us. We discover things about ourselves that we never knew that we never knew that we had. It's this type. And I'll just end with this note, is this type of Mesiras Nefesh, this ability to go above and beyond what we thought possible, that has characterized us. In last week's Parsha with Noach, I'm sure we're all familiar with the, Noach is compared to Avram in a somewhat negative way that, Noach didn't pray. The Zohar says Noach didn't pray for his generation. Avram prayed for even people like the wicked people of Sodom, and that's why the flood is called Mei Noach, the Navi Yeshayahu, and if Noach had lived in the days of Avram, he wouldn't have amounted, he wouldn't have been seen as anyone special. That's the Zohar. However, the Meshech Chochmah, at the end of the parsha of Noach, that is, the Meshech Chochmah quotes a medrash which gives a different comparison, a comparison between Noach and Moshe Rabbeinu. And there the medrash says Noach at the beginning was called Ish Tzadik Tamim, a righteous person, a righteous and a pure person. And at the end he's called an Ish Adama, a normal person of the ground. Moshe Rabbeinu at the beginning was called Ish Mitzri, an Egyptian, by the daughters of Yisrael. And at the end he's called Ish Elokim, he's called the man of God. He said, so the Meshech Chochmah says, what was the difference? What was it between Noach and between Moshe? We're not talking about Avram. Noach, the Medrash is comparing Noach to Moshe. And so the Meshech Chochmah says as follows. He says, Noach was basically concerned with himself. He was someone who was, he uses the expression, hitbodedut. He was someone who related to God in a very personalistic, a very individual way, meditating and developing a very sincere closeness to God. But it was all about him and God. Okay, it was all about connecting with God in the most powerful, intense way. Okay, no one says that that's fine. But Moshe Rabbeinu was Moser Nefesh. Moshe Rabbeinu gave of himself to other people. He wasn't so much concerned with his own personal spiritual development. He felt there was a need to be concerned when an Egyptian, kills one of the Jewish slaves, as we know the story, and so on and so forth. And this is what made Moshe great. This is what made Moshe so unique. And in a sense, this is again what we're experiencing now. Yet everyone is caught up in trying to deal with this trauma in their own personal way, but it's not stopping us from moving outside of ourselves and being concerned about other people as well. And everyone in their own way, from davening to learning to acts of chesed to, donating time and money, etc. All the things that people are doing in Israel and throughout the world. This should be a very, very, as difficult as the situation is for everyone, this should be a very, very encouraging thing, a very inspiring thing. And it's precisely that strength that we have in coming together as one and being Moshe Nefesh that will guarantee that with God's help, we will win this battle, we will grow from it, and we'll all become better for it. Thank you very much for listening, and hopefully things will get better. Thank you. Have a good week and a good Shabbos.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Be well.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.